A very warm good evening, one and all. Before we start the program, we request all of you all to join us to collectively pray and wish the doctors, nurses, police personnel, army personnel working at the front line to receive maximum mental and physical strength to guide India towards safety soon. We now welcome you all to the webinar on hematological malignancy in adolescents. Adolescents with hematological malignancies have been designated as a vulnerable population by the National Cancer Institute. This group has not enjoyed the same survival improvements over the past several decades compared to older and younger cohorts. One of the most important factors is the delay in diagnosis. Considering the importance of awareness and early diagnosis of hematological malignancy in adolescents, Team AHA Jaipur and Team IAP Jaipur are conducting this scientific session. Team AHA Jaipur is represented by Dr. Ashok Gupta as President, Dr. S.P. Sethi as Secretary, Dr. Kusum Kala as Joint Secretary, and Dr. Mohit Vora as Treasurer. Team IAP Jaipur consists of Dr. A. Patan as President, Dr. S.P. Sethi as Secretary, and Dr. Rajkumar Goyal as Treasurer. Team AHA and Team IAP, alongside Plasmagen Biosciences, as a digital and technology partner, welcome you all once again. Plasmagen Biosciences is a proud Indian biopharmaceutical organization headquartered in Bangalore, specializing exclusively in plasma protein therapy. With a singular vision to bridge the gap between demand and supply of plasma products in the country, Plasmagen was incorporated in 2010 with a vision to make India truly Atmanirbhar towards the availability of plasma protein therapy in the country. After having adopted the growth path since 2010, Plasmagen's flagship product, Plasmaglow, a brand of normal human immunoglobulin for intravenous use, is available in various strengths, found support from 8,000 plus doctors, including hematologists, neurologists, pediatricians across the country. But the most satisfying part of our journey was the ability to cater to 10,000 plus patients only with the support of many doctors included, some of you gathered here today. Into its 11th year of operations, Plasmagen is gearing up to manufacture supreme quality of human normal immunoglobulin, human albumin, and several other coagulation factors, meeting the current regulatory requirements at its own state-of-the-art manufacturing plant at Kolar in Bangalore. The fractionation plant has an initial capacity for fractionating 2 lakh liters of plasma. With the plant, Plasmagen is truly confident to make India Atmanirbhar in its requirement for plasma protein therapy. Since inception, Plasmagen has proudly partnered with several leading medical bodies, health organizations, blood banks across the nation. Plasmagen's contributions also include the creation of the Hemovigilance Program for India. And today is another such proud moment for having partnered today with all of you all to digitally and technologically support this webinar, Hematological Malignancy in Adolescents. For today's program, a note to all the attendees. If any of you face any technical issue, please do click on the chat box button on your screen. Plasmagen's team is available for assisting you. You may also try to refresh the page once and also use the chat box to ask your questions on it. I now hand over the forum to Dr. Kusum Kala, who is the Joint Secretary of Team AHA Jaipur. She is a consultant pediatrician at the Santokpa Durlabji Memorial Hospital, Jaipur. She has a keen interest in adolescent pediatrics, and that interest is what has driven her to pursue a postgraduate diploma course in adolescent pediatrics from CDC Kerala. With more than 20 years of experience, Dr. Kusum is also the Joint Secretary of the Adolescent Health Academy at Jaipur. I invite her to start the program. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Shivantika. Good evening, all dignitaries, my seniors, and my dear friends. I welcome you all to today's webinar. Since its inception on 28 May 2020, Adolescent Health Academy Jaipur branch has organized various academic activities, which included an AYA workshop last year. We are back with yet another important topic, that is hematological malignancy in adolescents, and we are fortunate enough to have an eminent speaker with us, Dr. Satyendra Kateva, to enlighten us on this topic. Chairpersons are Dr. Jagdish Singh ji and Dr. Kapil Garg sir. Moderator is Dr. Pavan Sulania. I now welcome Dr. S.P. Sethi, who is Secretary AHA Jaipur and also Secretary IAP Jaipur and Director Sethi Hospital. I request him to take the program forward. Over to you, Sethi boss.
Thank you, Kusum, for nice introduction, and good evening and very warm welcome to all. I, Dr. S.P. Sethi, Secretary, Jaipur IIP and Jaipur AHA, welcome all the dignitaries, faculty members and viewers on behalf of Team IEP and Team AHA. I'm also thankful to Plasmagen Biosciences for providing digital platform for today's webinar. So first, my duty is to first introduce our dynamic president of Adolescent Health Academic Jaipur branch, Dr. Ashok Gupta sir. He is president of Jaipur AHA and professor JK Hospital. He is executive director, International Neonatology Association, Geneva, member, International Association of Adolescent Health. He will introduce today's chairperson today, Dr. Jagdish Singh sir and Kapil Garg sir. Then next, I have to introduce Dr. Pathan sir. He is not here, I think. Welcome, Dr. Pathan sir. He is retired principal specialist, Jaipur Hospital. Currently, he is the president of Jaipur IAP and past secretary of Jaipur IAP. He's a very most humble person I've seen in pediatrics, and he has been attached to IAP from last 20 years. So thank you. Over to you, Ashok Gupta sir.
Thank you, Dr. Sethi, for your kind words of introduction and introducing the thought and the concept. And the team AHA, which is doing great work, and you, Kusum and Mohit, you've done excellent coordination and a good scientific program for the academy, and really brought laurels to this place. And with this, I'd like to introduce to the most eminent people who are going to chair the session today. One of them is Dr. Jagdish Singh. He's been my teacher too. He's one of the most brilliant persons I have ever come across in throughout my career, and he has shaped most pediatricians to reach a level which is unbelievable. And I think hematology just took off in the state of Rajasthan under his leadership. He's been the head of the department pediatrics at JK Lawn, was part of the SMS Medical School, and he has one thing great about this man is he is unbelievable. He has unbelievable abilities. He can get into any component of science of pediatrics, science of medicine, and he would do the best. And he did a very big book on medical legal issues facing doctors. And because after a certain stage, he got more invitations for that presentation on the medical legal component. And so, sir, I welcome you. And this is unbelievable to see you here again. And now we have Dr. Kapil Garg. Dr. Kapil Garg is a professor of pediatrics at SMS Medical College, part of JK Lawn Hospital, and he is currently the head of the hemato-oncology division at oncology division. Has really grown tremendously. So I welcome you, Dr. Kapil. And now I hand over to continue the proceedings to Dr. Jagdish Singh and Dr. Kapil for the next.
Thank you, sir. Is Dr. Pathan is here? No. So, Kusum, will you introduce our moderator, Pavan Surania, so that he can start the program?
Yes, of course. So, moderator for today's session is Dr. Pavan Sulania. He is Associate Professor, Department of Pediatrics, SMS Medical College and Hospital, Jaipur. And he has done his training in hemato-oncology from PGI Chandigarh in year 2015. So, I request Dr. Pavan to please coordinate the session and take the question and answer session after the talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, and all dignitaries. And I welcome everyone here on this platform, and I thankful for this IAP and AHA platform for providing such a great opportunity. I would here like to welcome Dr. Jagdish Singh sir and Dr. Kapil Garg sir, and I would like to Dr. Jagdish Singh sir to introduce Dr. Kateva and to start the session. We will take the question answers later on after the talk. If anybody want to ask any of the queries, they can directly put their messages in the chat box, or they can give me a personal message also. Thank you. And over to Dr. Jay Singh sir.
Sir, unmute करें.
Sir, unmute कीजिए sir.
Thank you everybody, and especially Dr. Ashok Gupta for his very kind and very flattering words. But मैं थोड़ा सा ये सारे जो words हैं, I want to pass it to Dr. Kapil Garg. मैं सारा का सारा जो credit है ना, इसी के कंधे पे ले लेता था. while I was not doing anything, just loitering around and Sara Boj, Dr. Kapil pe. So actually, I saw in him actually as a person who can really go ahead and take the torch. And of course, with the cooperation of all you people, and I'll say that in JCLON, actually, I received all cooperation. But the actual person who deserves all those very great words is Dr. Kapil Garg. And he'll be there for another 15 years in JCLON. And he'll be taking care of all these things. And yes, of course, the great team which we have, JCLON, actually, wherever we go, we say JCLON Jaipur. So yes, तो वो मैं I'll request everybody कि मैं पहले भी कह चुका हूँ कि लोन वर्ड हटा दो यार, LON है ये लोन, वो सारा डॉक्टर अशोक गुप्ता ने अपने टाइम पे उतार दिया था, सारे जितना भी था पता नहीं, I think billions of dollars. Now actually I come down to the speaker, Dr. Satyendra Kateva. उनका मैं बायोडाटा actually मैं लेके आया हूँ actually मेरे को. Yes, he was born in Yemen. One of the richest and most powerful person on this in this world, and with very great abilities in business. ये किसका बायोडाटा आ गया? अरे ये तो मुकेश अंबानी का है. Oh. Sorry, Dr. Kateva. Dr. Sitendra, actually, मैं उनके बारे में तो सिर्फ इतना ही वर्ड बोलूँगा. He's one of the richest persons in knowledge, skill, ability, and the desire and the hard work. And he's got that, and the desire. He's a fighter, and he's faced many fights. Actually, बहुत सारी wars आ चुकी हैं उनके रास्ते में. But he's always won it. And recently he's won many battles again. And so my congratulations to him, Dr. Sitendra. And he is the head of pediatric hemato-oncology in Manipal. That should be sufficient to say this way. With a keen interest in treating all hematological and oncological disorders, and with great results. He has innovated and took up many challenges. And treating, and when it came to bone marrow transplants in oncology as well as in thalassemia, he did a lot of daring things, of course, very well within the ethics and very well within the rules and regulations. And he succeeded in saving a lot of children and giving a support to so many parents. And he is blessed by all of them, because I meet many of those parents, and they just actually not only, but they bless him that we have a great person amongst us. So he is amongst us. He left a great career somewhere else, I may not go into the details. And he came to, I feel that when he felt that it is a service which he is doing. And this he was prompted by his family. His family actually motivated him, you come back to Rajasthan and give back what Rajasthan has given to you. And then through that, actually, he's probably taking up so many things all over the country. He's a renowned figure in the country, and my best wishes and my blessings also, and I just hope that he continues. And with the teamwork which we have in Jaipur, actually a close coordination with the government setup which we have, which is a great setup now, we must go ahead actually. And I just welcome him on this platform. And of course, I think the question and answers will be very well taken up after that, after he's really spoken about the problems in adolescents actually. And I just remember, before I go ahead actually, many of this actually, we keep on saying pain in the limbs karke aate hain, lot of children, adolescents I would say rather. He's got pain in the limbs, and generally we pass it off very casually in the OPD. Growing pains, growing arthralgia, even if the person is 12 years, 14 years, 18 years, growing arthralgia, growing pains ho rahe hain. And to the shock, actually, sometimes even I suffered a very big setback when it turned out to be an Ewing's sarcoma. Ultimately, there was a tumor which I didn't bother to palpate. I just missed it out, and I just took that. And I remember once Dr. Kapil Garg also pointing out कि sir वो ultimately तो वो leukemia निकला है, जो bone pains करके आया था. And his main complaint, he wandered here and there, and then ultimately even I was diagnosing that as a growing pain, which नहीं है इसको. And leukemia ka initial stages that could be, and we must remember that that is not the age group for growing pains. That is not the age group. So whenever such a person is coming up, so these practical, when in a busy OPD, when you have 200 or 150 or 50 patients, sometimes they do leave. And I remember actually talking to one of my persons in pathology, Dr. Kapil Garg, and they said that Ewing's sarcoma is coming left and right. बहुत ज़्यादा cases आ रहे हैं NSMS, Ewing's sarcoma, bone, not the non-bony ones. Every third case is Ewing's. So that actually just kept in mind. They're all most of them are adolescents and just past that adolescent group, 19, 20, 24. That was something which came to my thought. I'll just point it out in the beginning. So I hope actually, I think probably I now pass on the baton to Dr. Satyendra Kateva to begin his talk and enlighten all of us. Thank you, everybody, and thank you for the sponsors. Actually, I was just waiting for the silver chair. Actually, they were supposed to send me. He will be a chair person, so they'll be sending a silver chair to me. So that Kusum will be taken care of. They promised me a silver chair. Okay.
Yes, sure.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, the dignitaries and my respected teachers. I didn't have the luck to be trained directly by you, but there have been lot of instances where I felt like I wish I had that opportunity to do that. Near and dear to me because you know, once I was trained from Sir Gangaram Hospital, I started my career already at BL Kapoor Hospital, where I started my pediatric hematology oncology unit. And there was, you know, those were the days, you know, when India was doing only 100% matched transplants. So at that time, I was there was a girl who had leukemia. She was around 16 or 17, and she had one brother, and it was not a HLA matched donor. And she was a relapsed leukemia, AML. She wanted a transplant, otherwise her chances of survival are less than 10%. And unfortunately, she didn't have it. And then she, you know, she just held my hand and asked me a very difficult question. And that is the whole, you know, the crux starts of AYA from that. And she asked me a question right into my eyes that, am I going to die? And doctor, do you think because I was born in India, I'm dying? Because I've read on internet that then 100% matched transplants are available abroad. And you know, I can tell you right now, my whole body is now right now trembling because I remember that moment, and it was very difficult. And at that moment, I realized that, you know, there is a lot to learn, why the world is doing what we cannot do it. And that was the time when I left everything. I was already a consultant, and I went ahead and did my fellowship over there. And then I realized that, you know, this whole chunk, you know, the story of pediatrics, it was all into the medicine. Then pediatric came up. It was a very difficult battle for our seniors to, you know, win it for us. And then in that now there is another very important segment is adolescents and young adults. Now, what I'm going to show in the next 30 minutes is that, you know, the hope is not with the adult physicians, with those guys, A by A's. The hope lies with the pediatricians, and it is our obligation to recognize the needs of the very small kids, then the small kids, then the kids who are getting into the puberty, and these teens which start from 13. And so that's where I felt I already feel like, because you know, pediatrics already has become a big subject, and now the most challenging is the two. The one is the newborn, because then you are going to produce a human, an Indian for the whole society, and that needs to be productive. And then comes the adolescent, AYAs, because now you are going to give adults to the society, and they are going to shape the future of the world. So, you know, I feel very proud when I talk about pediatrics, because we are very disciplined physicians, we are very dedicated physicians, and all the time what we do is we are shaping the future of humanity. So with these words, I again thank you, sir, for the kind words. And I came back because I'm a son of a, an army person, and he was not happy me serving the Western world. So I came back, and so let's start. So what we are going to discuss is that the teens and young adults, are they different? And this is in particular in terms of hematological oncological issues. And yes, are they different? Then are they behaving differently as well? And how different they are? So it is just that their size and shape is a bit more now looking like an adult, or there is something more? Because please remember that right at the age of puberty, something major happens when a body starts transforming into the other one. And what are the implications onto that transformation? Now, as a pediatrician, what should be our talking point when we are discussing a hematological oncological issues with the adolescent or their families? And the way forward. So the whole subject of hematological oncological is so vast in its capacity that we can even have a conference, and the world is already having conferences about the TYAs, AYAs. Even in India, we have conferences about it. So my job is just to sensitize the audiences that, we are dealing with a challenge, but the pleasure of meeting the challenge is so huge that we can change the direction of this particular group of pediatrics for the betterment of that patient, that family, the society, and the nation. Now, when we try to differentiate between teens and adolescents and the pediatrician, I was looking for a cartoon which actually passed the message very, very categorically, and that's what I found. That, they might look like pediatric or they might look like adults, but once we start looking at them very closely, they are not. They in itself are a different entity. And the cartoon shown into the slide, actually, they look like similar, but they are actually not. And this was the best cartoon, which actually starts our evening, the scientific session, that yes, they are different. And there might be reasons for them to be different. And we are going to discuss what those reasons might be. So the one reason is the puberty. And, in puberty, we have the endocrinal and the hormonal surges. And we know that, with hormones, there is a reshaping of the whole immune surveillance. Now, let us understand that somebody is having a cancer and somebody is not having a cancer. So let us make it very, very broad and easy to understand. So in a person, if the immune system shakes hand with the cancer cell and immune system let that cell grow into the cancer, then we have the cancer. But if the immune system is smart enough and doesn't shake hands with the cancer cell, we do not have the cancer. And in the simpler language, we call it a immune or the cancer surveillance. And the important cells into those are NK cells and the lymphocytes and all that. And we know that the few hormones which are around the puberty and after that, they have an important impact onto, in fact, the immunosuppressive action onto them. So can that be the cause? We still are working onto that, and there certainly are a possible concern, but they can be a cause. So the other major problem with the adolescents and the teens is that they contribute to decision making. And as per the law of the land, we have to involve them with the decision making. Now, becoming 15 years doesn't mean, or even if you are allowed to make a decision, doesn't mean that, you are wise enough to make a decision which in the current situation might be the best. There is a difference in the wisdom and the, being smart. So that might not be there, but since they feel now they are the, they want the autonomy, that, they want to take the call. Sometimes it's very difficult to convince them about something which is absolutely important for them, but still it's a task and it should be dealt with primarily from the referring pediatrician. The work should start there and it ends up with the person who is going to treat it. The other thing is, with a lot of energy and the hormones, the one thing comes up is, I don't care. And you try to surf onto the internet, you try to understand something, you feel like that I know everything, don't tell me anything. And then with that energy comes, the innocent arrogance of the adolescence. And then, where you are angry with everything. And that makes, sometimes the things very, very difficult. I don't want this line. I don't want this medicine. It makes me puke here and there. I just don't like it. I don't want to take the blood today. And you are looking at him that, but honey, your hemoglobin is 5. How is going to work? But still she doesn't want to take it, right? It's such a difficult situation, but you have to get over it. And then, epidemiology of cancer. Now, whatever the reason might be, that what happens to these teens, whatever the cause might be, but the epidemiology of cancer changes completely. And what sir was telling right now, the Jagdish sir was telling was that, it is, I'm going to show you a slide where you can't believe it, is this true? It changes so drastically that, we need to know that, I don't know what happens, but something happens which changes this completely. The other problem is, which, I guess Avantika, touched upon that, this is one segment, not into the pediatrics, not into the adult, where we have very less number of the clinical trials. And one of them, the reason in the clinical trials is because these adolescents might not want to be the part of clinical trials. And the whole world looks up to the pediatric oncology with the pride that, these are the guys who has taught the world how to do multi-centric trials, how to gel with each other. And this is the one segment of pediatric oncology where we haven't been able to do a lot of trials. And because of that, we don't understand this segment so fluently or so exhaustively. And that's the reason we don't know exactly what is going on. But now, with more and more advancement and the more and more skills being introduced into the counseling, we are now able to do a lot of trials, and hopefully next decade we will change it completely. The change has already started. Now, this is the SEER data, and the SEER data is the data from North America. As a country, we are still struggling to make a data system where we can very confidently tell us, about everything. But that is primarily because, India still is in a state where, the access to care is centric at the bigger centers, and at the bigger center, the workload is so much that, having very robust data becomes in itself becomes a difficult. Because, I tell you from my PG days that, the routine dialogue during the PG was OPD salta diya. And later on, when I went into the Western world, then I realized that, it was not Sultana, it was OPD mein sare patient dekh liye. So, but it was so many, when I was doing my PG, we used to have 2 lines, one for the bone marrow, one for the lumbar puncture. And God forbid, if you are sleepy and you start lumbar puncture into the bone marrow, you might not even know until you are done with both the lines. So the number needs to be controlled, and for that we need to decentralize. Anyhow, this SEER data is from the North American. And if you look at this pie chart, you see in the 0 to 14 years, the most common cancer is leukemia, then the brain tumors, and then some lymphomas, and then you see the sarcomas, which I was talking about in less than 14 years. It was just like 4%, and soft tissue sarcomas 6%. So together they constitute around 10 to 11% sarcomas. Germ cell tumor just 3%. Carcinomas and melanomas, they are there, but they're just 4%, and other cancer 0.3%, right? And something happens, right after 14 years, and you see now the pie chart. It's a complete different ball game. You look at the leukemia from 31%, they have just reversed to 13%. Now the most common are the lymphomas, and right after that, you look at these, neuroblastomas, the carcinomas 20%, melanomas, the bone tumors have increased. Now the sarcomas have increased. This is completely changed, and the pathophysiology and the pathogenesis of leukemia versus the solid tumors. Now with more and more understanding, we understand that they are different. But the thing is that something happens at puberty or peripubertal time, which is actually having a effect onto the immune surveillance of both the solid tumors and the liquid tumors. Plus, there is something, in this age group which was not there into the pediatric, and that can be that the tumors are not only different, but they are even smarter. So maybe whatever change is happening because of the hormones and the endocrinal surges and all that, even the cancer cells are becoming smarter to deal with the chemotherapy we are throwing at them. So they learn how to, how to survive those things. And that's why suddenly the outcomes of the adolescents and young adults, they come down heavily from the pediatric outcomes. And they are still better than adults, but this is very difficult to digest. That, what happens in 1 year? What has happened over here? And a lot of work is going on into this direction. And we soon might, there are a few other practical things also other than the pathophysiology and the hormones and the, the sex hormones and all that. But there is something practicality of the things and which we are going to discuss here also. Now, the one problem is awareness and access, and this is a problem across the canvas for a poor country like ours. We have started, behaving like we are a superpower. We can threaten this and that and all that. But the reality is right in front of us right now. We are a poor country, and awareness and access is a big deal for each and every patient. And this is a big deal primarily once you are into the pediatric or adolescents, where your care is into the hand of somebody else. And that somebody else has to go to earn bread for you so that you don't die hungry. It's a difficult situation. So, they might not come to you as frequently as you might want them to be with you, but still, it's in the hand of somebody else. And sometimes, and that leads to abandonment of the treatment, but this becomes more of an issue into the adolescents because sometimes they don't feel like coming. And sometimes, unfortunately, they belong to such a poor family where they themselves are an earning member. And, नहीं आ सकता, सेठ जी ने छुट्टी नहीं दी, किसी और ने छुट्टी नहीं दी. It becomes really, really difficult to understand that, why can't they come? And access to insurance, this is a national phenomena. I talk to my friends, non-medical friends, and I ask them this question, have you taken the medical insurance? And they'll start saying, अरे भाई सुब बोलो यार, कैसी बातें कर रहे हो डॉक्टर साहब? And I don't understand. I don't understand the faith is one thing, but how do you know you are never gonna be sick? And we want now the best of the world, but for that you have to have money to pay for that, and we don't take medical insurance. So this is a categorical problem into the AYAs. When I was into the Western world, I learned something age-appropriate care, and it's a complete miss in our country. Age-appropriate care starts from the support groups, then starts from the psychologists, then starts from the social group, then starts from the counselors. And then we have even the trained oncologists and the physicians to deal with those guys. Because what are they going to like? What kind of conversation they want into their OPD visits and all that? It's a complete miss. The few private centers or the few, the bigger, the government centers, if they're trying to introduce you that, the people still take it as a, ये तो शोशाबाजी है यार, नहीं, बस पैसे लेने के तरीके हैं. But it helps a lot. I've seen it. But it's into the very, 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 very infancy, and I hope this is gonna get better. The third thing is autonomy. They want to take decision for their life, which is a major issue, and I tell you why, we have already discussed. The other thing is fertility preservation. Now, you diagnose a patient of leukemia or some cancer, and you are gonna send them to the treating physician. And conversation of fertility preservation has to start from day 0, right? But the family suddenly hear the word cancer and they feel like, what are you talking, doctor? We are right now dealing with a point where I don't even know my kid is going to survive or not. What fertility are going to talk about? But that's where the thing is, once you start talking about the fertility with them, if you very calmly make them understand that, I'm talking about 10 years down the lane when your son will be okay and all that, that gives them a hope. That gives them a hope that, okay, that at the end of the tunnel there is light, and my kid again can have a successful life with the kids of his or her own. So that should start from there. It's a difficult conversation. Sometimes parents might understand, might not, but please start from there. And access to trial, we have already discussed that, because the families don't understand, the moment you put in a word clinical trial, forget about the families and the doctors into this, the majority of the doctors will start, ye to experiment kar raha hoga yaar, kuch bhi kar raha hai. And that is how the family, and that is how the whole country is. Access to clinical trial, even if you understand it is important for me, But then, oh, there is something experimental, and even if maybe the child is going to die because of leukemia, but it should not die because of some experimental therapy somewhere, right? It's very, very difficult to understand the thought process, but it's a problem. But still, we have to convince them that even if 20-30% are gonna make it, you might win to 20-30%, and that 20-30% for you becomes 100%. So it's a difficult situation, but somehow we have to get over it. Then there are some unique features about AYAs when we come to the hematological oncological malignancies. So these adolescents and young adults can tolerate more intensive chemotherapy than adults. So, my adult physicians, they will smile at me and they'll say, how do you treat somebody who has mustaches and beard? And they smile at me. They think the pediatrics is 12 years and they don't even accept it like 18 years. They say that the moment there is puberty, they should be sent to adult side, and I completely disagree with them. But the same thing is there because the majority of the people think like that. So they are physicians and their next comparison with adults. So they are at better in tolerating the chemotherapy, but unfortunately, when they have a cancer, most of these kids goes to the medical oncologist, where they are treating the adult patients. Adult patients tolerate intensive chemotherapy less. So the physician per se is tuned or adjusted to the lesser intensive chemotherapy. And unfortunately, these kids who tolerate chemotherapy better than the adults, they are given the lesser intensive chemotherapy. And that has got a significant reason. That is the main reason that their outcome is at least 10% lower or 15% than the pediatric or the counterparts. Then in older patients, the adult patients, they have a lot of comorbidities, and because of the comorbidities, slight increase here and there, and then they stop the chemotherapy for 7 days, 10 days. And that habit goes on into the AYAs also. And I completely in sync with thought process that, AYAs and even the young adults, they need to be treated on the pediatric protocols, not the adult protocols. And we will have 1 or 2 slides for that to prove the point that, if to note our feeling, we are talking data here, we are talking science here. Now, when we try to compare them with the children, this is one of the main problem, anticipatory vomiting. So, having a small kid who doesn't understand anything, okay, we are going to go to Jaipur, they feel happy, they don't bother much, they don't puke here and there, and they forget about the pain with the cannulation and all that. But these AYAs, they start feeling it 2 or 3 days before the actual chemotherapy. They start puking, they start throwing, and they even refuse that I'm not going to go. So sometimes I have to even start those patients 2 days prior to their feeling from ondansetron or even the other medications, where we try to control so that at least they come for the the treatment. The other significant issues with the AYAs is that from pediatrics something happens and the number of stem cells into their bone marrow decreases. We can still increase it by giving GCSF and all that, but generally the stem cell numbers go down. So that means that after the intensive chemotherapy, there are fewer stem cells to rescue the bone marrow, and the recovery gets slightly delayed than the pediatric. And if you want to do a bone marrow transplant, then because their weight has become more, they have, they need the higher stem cells for the bone marrow transplant. And those stem cells in bone marrow transplant, if you are doing autologous, then the patient himself has to give, that becomes a challenge. And if you are doing a allogenic transplant where the donor is somebody other than patient, then harvesting those higher number of stem cells sometimes become a challenge. Then comes the concept of chemobrain. So chemobrain is categorically a concept in less than 3 years and into the AYAs. So in less than 3 years, we can understand that is the time when the brain is growing, and the growing brain can be, if we expose them with the chemotherapy, which has got impact onto the cell cycle. So that might have an impact onto the brain. But after 3 to 13, 14, most of the chemotherapy is okay, other than the radiation. Radiation is something, it's nasty for the pediatric population, and most of the time you want to avoid it, at least to the brain. But after the AYA, again the chemobrain features become pronounced, and they are pronounced primarily because now we can talk to these kids and we can ask them what are you feeling, or they are more expressive than the pediatric patients, or there is something more into the brain. which actually makes it more vulnerable to the chemo effect, is now under evaluation. And I think there is, with puberty, something changes even into the brain and the blood-brain barrier, and that also has implications for the treatment. As we talk about fertility at stretch, if it is a male, then you have to have that conversation, and that conversation has to be in an entirely separate area, because the moment you start talking it openly in front of the parents, that the game is over there and then and there. So you should sit down, just one-to-one conversation. You tell them it is okay, it is normal to have erections, it is normal to have semen production, and we can right now look at your sperm numbers and we can preserve them. And so later on, once you are married, you might not, because of the chemotherapy, your sperm might go down, but your married life or your sex life is not going to be disturbed. But after that, your marriage, you might want to have your own kids, and that at the time these sperms might be had. For the girls, we do not have that robust system, but still now the ovarian stripping and the freezing of a lot of ovum and all that is now happening. So I strongly advise that it should be done. Whatever the problem is, whatever the family might be saying that, doctor, what are you going to talk about it? Right now the things are very difficult for us and all that, but you are saying all this. So we have to somehow do it. I don't know how to do it. In the toxicity, these kids with chemotherapy, at least particularly in the leukemia patient with L-asparagine, they have a lot of clots, more clots than the pediatric, and that should be kept in mind. And there are a lot of reasons for that we don't want to get into. But the good news is, the most important drug for leukemia treatment is dexamethasone. One of the important drugs is they told it is better than the adults and even in the pediatrics. So that's something they like, because dexamethasone gives you energy, more than the steroids, and this age group like it very much. So that's something, they take it very happily. And for the anthracyclines, dono, doxorubicin, we need to have the data. Is it more, worse, or less than that? Now, bone marrow transplant also is difficult, primarily difficult because as such, for whatever reason you are doing the transplant, their outcome is 15 to 20% less than the pediatric counterpart. So in pediatrics, if we say 70% of the kids are going to be okay, here we say 60%, 55 to 60% are going to be okay. Thalassemia, you have at JK Lone, one of the very big thalassemia units, you have a lot of class 3 patients. A lot of class 3 patients pains after 13, 14 years. Now their requirements are different, their blood transfusion requirements are different, their chelation requirements are different. Now suddenly their bone becomes a big issue. Their other hormones, their glucose homeostasis becomes an issue, their testicular volume becomes an issue, everything, a lot of issues. And then we need somebody. So right after 18 years, if you say, okay, now you leave this and go to the gentleman into that building, they feel like, they're just a piece of trash and we are now throwing them away and they don't want to go. So, and it doesn't make, to me, it doesn't make logic, the ethics, the morality from any point of view. If you know the kid for the last so many years, we should not. And for that, what we need to do is either we add a special physician to our team and with whom we also get trained and we also train the physician into it, or we somehow read more and more and we become their physician rather than, they start taking them up. Sickle cell disease, we know with more and more age, they become more fragile for the obvious reasons, more sequestration, more strokes, and a lot of things. Aplastic anemia is categorically a problem because in pediatric, idiopathic aplastic anemia in adolescents, the incidence is higher. And now the game is changing in aplastic anemia. Lot of data is coming where now the ATG is going down as an option and other transplants are becoming more. My feeling, my understanding about the subject is in next 5 years, we will have something where transplant ABC type are going to be the main treatment and ATG is going to be, if nothing ABC can be done, maybe ATG is there. So it is going to put a lot of burden, the financial burden, the economic burden onto the country, onto the institute that are going to treat it. So that should be kept. Then in this age group, we have autoimmune diseases. We have the start of JIAs, we have the start of even MS, very rarely, right? But you have those things, a lot of autoimmune disease. And now a lot of data is coming up that if there is steroid refractory autoimmune disease, autologous transplant is the standard of care. We can fix the whole immune system and because those are the powerhouse of the, the future. So we can fix them. And for the every transplant, with increasing into the weight, the cost of the transplant goes up. So we have to be aware that, with more and more weight, it is going to be difficult for us to transplant them later. So these are the few things which we need to understand. Now, 2 or 3 slides as a pediatricians, a diagnostic challenge, because you have some pain in the groin or into the bone and you want to make a diagnosis, right? And tissue is the issue in medical oncology. Tissue is the issue in medical oncology. Please remember that. If you palpate a lymph node and you feel this patient might have some malignancy, please never ever, I request all of you to do a FNA. Please do a lymph node excision, because then we look at it into the microscope, and then the immunohistochemistry with different strain, and then that block is used for molecular profiling of cancer. And let me tell you, I have treated kids, at Manipal who were labeled as refractory, and I biopsied them. I did their molecular profiling. We started treating them with a targeted therapy, and they have responded. They are into the CR. So it's important. No FNA, please. Just the whole lymph node excision block, and that should be kept ready other than IHC for the molecular profiling. If you are dealing with a mediastinal mass, be very careful in doing the biopsy, because that can lead to, a serious issue of the airways and intubation and all that. And the same thing goes for the spinal compression and superior vena cava syndrome. And in both the situations, it's a kind of a medical emergency, and it might not be a good idea to start dealing at your end. You need to involve the pediatric oncology unit, and that can be the best thing for that patient. So diagnostic challenge, tissue is the most important thing, and then few emergency. But then if you are thinking of a leukemia in adolescents and you want to do the bone marrow, so the bone marrow is something which is a painful procedure, because with aspirations, I have asked this from the adults that, they feel like dying, and, they feel like, it was very difficult once you suck up for the, the aspiration. But it is important to convince them, and it is important so that we do not do it again. So do it appropriately. So one of the most important things right after the bone marrow is, most of the time you get a report, oh, it is diluted. Sorry, report is not possible. So right after taking out the bone marrow in aspiration, please see whether you have taken out the particles or not. And there is a very half an hour, 1 hour training with your pathologist. They can train you in that, You just tell them, they will train you how to make the slides with the particles, and you can be very sure, yeah, there were particles. And then biopsy is a must, because in aplastic anemia, doing cellularity is the most important thing we are looking at. Even in leukemia, it is important, because sometimes, aspiration might be dry because the marrow is so jam-packed, and all you are left with is a biopsy onto which with the IHC you make a diagnosis. So even in the bone marrow, you are suspecting a malignancy, whether it's a solid tumor, you are suspecting a secondary to the bone marrow, or the leukemia primarily, you should do a biopsy, aspiration biopsy, and then please send it to a hematopathologist. Do not think a pathologist is a hematopathologist. Hematopathologist is something who has left the whole pathology and entirely focusing at the hematopatology, and the whole outcome of this bone marrow aspiration biopsy is different. We have a hematopathologist, and I tell you, it's hell and heaven difference. It's day and night difference. Reporting a bone marrow by a hematopathologist and a pathologist. Then we have to take, other than the aspiration biopsy, other samples, one ADTA sample for the flow cytometry. So flow cytometry is a specific test where you are searching for the proteins onto the cell, different proteins at one time, and it's a very, very specific test that is now available, at least in-house, at least in my hospital, it is available in-house. Then you need to take EDTA and heparin also. So EDTA is for the molecular profiling. Again, here we are not going to do the genetics of, so once you tell the parents into any cancer that we are going to do a genetic testing of the blood, what they all think is that, oh, there must be something wrong with the mother, poor lady. So please, whenever you are talking about, then you say that it is the genetics of the cancer, genetics of not the kid and the parents. And that actually saves a lot of families, I'm telling you. So please, you have to talk about it. Other than this, then we have to do the genetics of the cancer cell, not the parents or the kid. And for that, you need to take a heparin, the green top vial also, that is going to be useful for the cytogenetics and the fish and all that. So Before you refer a patient to a oncologist or the pediatric oncologist, what should you tell? You give them confidence. You tell them there is a problem, but there is definitely a solution. And let me tell you, the cancer in pediatrics overall, they do far better than any adult cancer. Almost, I can say blindly that 80% of the pediatric cancer, barring a few, there might be a few which might not be, can be treated, can be cured with one-time chemotherapy, right? In adolescents, it's come down to 10 to 15%, but still 60 to 70% is a huge number once we compare them. But the problem is we have to understand the cancer. So 100 patients, once we see 100 patients of adult cancer, the pediatric and the adolescent cancers are just 8. So now you understand the society is primed. The society is conditioned with the information of adult cancer because they are 100 and we are 8. And adult oncology, adult cancer do not have outcomes as good as ours. So the moment they think cancer, they think of death. And that's where you need to tell them, no, it's different till in the young age of the pediatric. It is not like that. And you just take the treatment appropriately and it's going to be okay. You need to tell them that. And, to make sure that we add in diagnosis, you have to tell them that maybe few of the tests, they might again do it in the best interest of the patient, because the treatment might change. Because the moment, the one thing is that, it's a painful. I do it into the sedation. So none of my patient goes out and complain that it was painful. But in most of the centers, it is done into the awake state. And once they do into the awake state, it's a painful. So the moment you tell maybe the bone marrow will be done again, they're so pissed off. They just leave that center. That no, pehli baar mein kyun nahi kiya? This is something wrong. You should have done. You understand at that time they are so primed that time. So you have to tell them we have made the diagnosis. Now to help the patient further, we need the further, and we might have to repeat it again. And please try to avoid giving chemotherapy if you are not a treating physician, pediatric oncologist. Because after giving chemotherapy, if we have to do few tests, then it's futile, because now with chemotherapy we have changed the picture and the whole diagnosis is not made. And if the whole diagnosis is not made, in the treatment you are standing right at a signal light where 4 or 6 passages are going, and which one to take is the big deal. So that's where my request to all the fellow pediatricians is. Now, 1 or 2 genetic evaluation. So genetic evaluation is important, particularly when we are dealing with marrow failures, metabolic diseases, immunodeficiency diseases, monogenic diseases like thalassemia and sickle cell. There is a family history of similar cancer or lots of other cancer in the family. Then we need to have a look at the genetic evaluation. But for all the practical purpose, what you need to tell them is, because if a family has 2 or 3 kids, what the question they are going to ask is, mere bade bete ko hi ho gaya, mere chote bete ko to problem nahi aani. And most of the time, 99.99% you can say yes, koi problem nahi honi hai. But वो उनके बच्चों में, आप उसके अलग भाई बहनों में, आपकी फैमिली में कोई प्रॉब्लम ना होए, we need to do a testing. And sometimes we do the testing because we don't know the diagnosis, and then we have to do it. So please, it is important. Very commonly ordered test nowadays is CES, and clinical exome sequencing can be done by Sanger sequencing or the next generation sequencer both. Most of us have started ordering this. But before we order the test, we need to understand their flow. They need to understand the gene coverage by that procedure. That is very, very important. These are very, very costly tests, and I'll try to make a very good example right in front of you. So I had 1-year-old boy with frequent bleeds. They came to me. I made a diagnosis of hemophilia A just by doing the coagulation profile. The factor 8 level was less than 1%. I sent the genetic workup, and the family, because it was so frequent, family was, the both are into the IT, the husband and wife, they wanted the prophylaxis, and we started the child onto the prophylaxis. But, once you start a prophylaxis, the clinical thing may be there, but you really need to know, because if you start a hemophilia onto the early prophylaxis, there is a chance that you are making them prone for the inhibitors also. So you really need to know that what is going on. So right even into the prophylaxis, after giving the factor 8, sometimes you try to do the levels to understand the game. Is the factor rise is appropriate and it is staying okay? So in this child, it was not up to the mark. And I was thinking about the cause that, I'm starting it at 15 months. What can be the cause? It is not that easy. If I was starting at 5-6 months, maybe some inhibitors. What is the cause and all that? And by now, the genetic workup came back from the lab at Bangalore, and they said nothing. There's no genetic mutation of hemophilia gene. You see it over here. The coverage of factor 8 and factor 9 gene is 100% in this assay by NGS. And they said this is not even hemophilia. Now suddenly somebody is starting a prophylaxis, and I'm thinking of some inhibitors and whatever it is, and they are saying, oh, there is nothing into it. So that was the time when I talked to the scientist over there, and I requested to do MLPA of large deletions and categorically the intron 22. And they very, it was very difficult to convince them, but I asked them at least do the MLPA, and that's what they came out with. Right after the MLPA, they told me, oh doctor, there is intron 22 mutation in this child, and it was missed. It can miss sometimes and all that. So all I'm saying is, it was intron 22, and why intron 22 I thought was, so here is a hemophilia, just an example. So intron 22 inversion is 1/3 of the cases of the hemophilia A, but 1/4 of these patients develop inhibitors. So now you understand, and why do you want to? I asked them to look up to the MLP of the large deletion and the intron 22 because that almost covers up all the inhibitors. And it was very logical. If this child has inversion 22, it might miss on to the NGS, and MLP I might catch it, and it makes sense to me. And MLPA is, what is MLPA? So MLPA is that this is kind of that some sequence to be traced into the sample. Then you have two designer probes which actually comes from the both ends. They actually get ligated to each other, and after that they have their special probes designed at the ends where they can kept on amplifying into the PCR, and you can catch it. So it's really important to understand that ordering CES, clinical exome sequencing, is a good idea. But what you are ordering, you need to talk to the scientist over there. You need to tell them, show me the coverage of all the genes of this disease by NGS. And if they try to give you the gyan of Sanger versus NGS, so this is for just our understanding that Sanger and NGS, the basic concept is same. Whatever we are doing is, we are, with the help of DNA polymerase, we are adding the fluorescent nucleotides one by one onto a growing DNA template. So we are just adding the fluorescent nucleotides into this, and each incorporated nucleotide is identified because we are adding the fluorescent tags with them, right? So this is the same for them. What is the difference? The difference between Sanger and NGS is sequencing volume. Sanger, being the older one, only one single DNA fragment is going to be sequenced at one time. But with NGS, you can have millions of fragments. So now think of the TAT. Now, if you want to have a test very quickly available, doing a Sanger and NGS, obviously the choice is NGS. As a clinician also, as a scientist also, as a student of science also. But we need to understand that when things are being done very rapidly and quickly, there's still a scope of missing out very larger things or very smaller things. And that's where MLPA can be something. So it's just that we need to know what we are ordering. Can it be missed by the sequencing? We need to know that. So just last few slides. So is there a difference between the adolescent, the young adults and the children with precursor B-cell ALL? So here is the data from the COG. COG Children's Oncology Group, and earlier it was the Children's Cancer Group. So they reported that after 13 years, the very high risk factor with a high relapse rate. So right after 13 years, they say the ALL child have the poorer outcome. And then they took up these patients, and in the same paper, they presented that outcome is worse even with bone marrow transplant. So it is not that the ALL outcome, yes, ALL outcome is poorer after 13 years, but even if you transplant them before 13 years or after 13 years, the outcome is poorer. And they showed it into these 136 patients, and in 57 patients they were more than 13 years, and 79 children they were less than 13 years, and that's what they showed, that age less than 13 years, your chances of survival are far better than age more than 13 years, even with bone marrow transplant. It is a clear-cut indication. Then there can be a lot of reasons for that. Cytogenetic, molecular genetics, I told you that, they all tell you, this cytogenetics and molecular genetics and immunophenotyping, how good or bad this patient is going to respond to the given treatment. And why do they change in adolescents than in comparison to the pediatrics is the work is going on, and soon we will have the answer. But it is very clear that in children more than 13 years, ALL outcome except with chemotherapy is poorer, and even with bone marrow transplant is poorer. So this is the segment where if you need a transplant, as a pediatrician, you need to convince the family, please get the transplant done, because with just chemotherapy, the outcome are going to be dismal. Even with transplant, you are inferior to the smaller children, but without transplant, it is dismal. So this is something you keep in brain. AML, again, this is a paper from Raul Ribeiro. So here the data is from Europe and North America. And you can see it here, age less than 15 years, then 15 to 39 years, and then more than 40 years. And here are the segments, different age times. You see the outcome has increased, right? Even this has increased in 15 to 39 also, but you compare with less than 14, it is down. And even the outcome overall over the time has increased for age 40 and more also. But you compare them, it is highest into less than 15, poorer into the 15 to 39, and very poor after age 40 plus. So even for AML also, the outcomes are bad. This cartoon tells you clear cut that before 14 and after 14 is a different ball game. So even if your children has got AML and if you're into the adolescent, you, for all the practical purpose, being a pediatrician or the referring physician, you should be in your brain very clear that it is going to be a difficult malignancy to treat, and we should keep our antenna higher or open for the more aggressive treatment. Then even if you do these, even if you do transplant for the child, so here is the paper from Navneet Majel from USA. And here is also, you can see that in AML with transplant, where you are doing the brother or sister matched transplants, the outcome over years have increased from there from 40% to like 55 to 60%, 70% over here. And this is poorer into AYA and further poorer into the older adults. So even with transplant, and this is the same outcome with the unrelated donor transplant, it was best into the younger children, then poorer into the AYA, and very poor into the adult one. So in short, even the simple chemotherapy treatment gives you the poorer outcome to AML, and this is further poorer with the transplant, both in ALL and AML. Thalassemia, something very nearer to your heart. So whenever we see thalassemia, we see this classification, the risk classification given by Professor Lucarelli at Pesaro. So class 1 is good chelation, no liver swelling, no fibrosis into the liver, and class 3 is bad, irregular chelation, liver swelling, fibrosis. And class 3, and why do we say it's bad? Once you see class 1, class 2 outcome, 84 to 90%, right? It was way bad. And you see class 3, thalassemia-free survival just 60%. So it's a huge thing. So what is, as a pediatrician, where are we failing? If a family needs a transplant, it should be referred early rather than late, because right after, once you are into the class 3, there is a difficulty. Professor Lucarelli even introduced a protocol 26 for these patients who are class 3, and doing few left and right and smarter things, he has produced result again of 90%. So still, for a matched sibling transplant, we can still think that age is no bar, but then your liver has to be good, your chelation has to be good, a lot of things. We can still do transplant, but it was best when the child was younger. So as a pediatrician, if some family is going to be given an option of transplant, should be given very early. So how is thalassemia data now? It was way back like in early 22, and now this is just 1 year old, right? And that's where it tells you that if you are into till like 15 years, you're going to do well around 85 to 90%. And these are all type of transplant. But if you are more than 15 years, your outcome come down to quickly to 60%. So, and here you can also see these are different type of transplant, 100% matched transplant, unrelated donor transplant, haplotransplant. They're all between 70 to 85%. So it doesn't matter whether you're doing 100% or 50%, it might be just 5 to 10% difference. But all you need to do is you need to refer them early. Once they are more than 15, 16 years, the outcome is seriously 20, 30% less. So you need to just remember that. Now the last 2 slides, who should be treating the AYAs? Because I told you in the limited time it was not possible to cover everything. So who should be treating the AYAs, ALL? And we feel like we should be treating it as a pediatric oncologist, but is there data to say that? Yes, there is data. And the data, the first paper I want to present is from Japan. and they have compared it between the young adults, adolescents with acute lymphoblastic anemia treated with a pediatric protocol. Now you see it's beautiful, and that's what they present. If you treat them onto the pediatric protocols, it is the red line, and the blue line is once you treat them onto the adult protocols. You can see it categorically, clear cut. There is no question asked. This is standard risk ALL. This is high risk ALL. In high risk, pediatric protocols become more important. So there is no questions that pediatric protocols are far better than the adult protocols when it comes to acute lymphoblastic leukemia and the AMLs, and it should be treated onto the pediatric protocols. So one thing sorted out. Now does it matter whether the pediatric protocol is being given by the pediatric oncologist versus the adult oncologist? So this question was sorted out, my friend, by Sumit Gupta from Toronto. And this paper came up just like 1.5 years ago. They had some 271 patients, and some almost half received. These kids received 15 to 21 years of age, the categorical AYA. Half received treatment at adult center and remaining received at the pediatric center. And what they came out with this, the green one is, pediatric patients, these AYA treated into the pediatric institutes, into the pediatric protocols. So the green line, the best line is that you are given a pediatric protocol in a pediatric center. The blue line is you are given a adult protocol into an adult institute, pathetic, 40% less, right? And the red line is that you are given a pediatric protocol, but still into a adult center. So it has become better, but it is not at par with pediatrics. Still the gap is 10 to 15%. And this is event-free survival, and this is overall survival. This is clear cut that it is not only the pediatric protocol which is important, but it is the integrity of the pediatric unit which makes the difference. So these child not only should be treated by the pediatric oncologist, but they should be treated in pediatric protocols at least, if some medical oncologist treating them. And just to make it further clear, look at here. So this is LOC. LOC is the locus of care. So the child who were given the pediatric locus of care, and the child, they are red, and the blue one is the who were given the adult locus of care. You see the difference? It's more than 20%. It's science. It's not feeling of me or Jagdish sir or Kapil sir or whosoever it might be. It is science that if you treat them into the pediatric centers, onto the pediatric protocols, they do better than their counterparts who are being treated at the adult centers. And with this, I try to sum it up that adolescents have different set of challenges. We need to treat them. They might have slightly inferior outcome than pediatric patients, but still, it is far better than adults. And they all should be treated in the more equipped centers for these adolescents. They should be treated more aggressively, but with a softer and lot of supportive care. They're just like, and the flowers. This is the age where they get depressed easily. They charge up very easily, and we need to handle them very carefully. Pediatric protocols given by the pediatric centers, they have the best outcome for them. Cancers in AYA is a challenge which needs planning at two levels. The one level is at the disease, and the other one you need to plan it for that individual. And the role of referring physician is of paramount importance, and that should be kept in mind. And this categorically, the last slide, it's really that there are few questions right now which we might not answer, that what the hell is going on, why the change happens with the AYAs. But soon we will have the answer. Until then, we can just pray. Right now, it's time to pray. The difficult time is going on. And with that, I thank you to the organizers and the August jury over here to give me this opportunity to talk to my teachers, my colleagues, and my friends. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Hello.
Yes.
So, thank you, Dr. Kateva boss, for this wonderful presentation and very well elaborated and in detail. And what was needed was he talked about. And I would like to ask Dr. Kapil Garg sir to summarize and about the whole talk and give us some more insights with his.
Dr. Pawan, can we take first questions and then concluding remarks at the end of the question? No.
Okay, that is also good. Okay, so there are few questions. Almost all questions have been already answered very well by Dr. Kateva, but still few people have their own queries regarding the various things. One of them is by Dr. O.P. Balodia. So he wants to know about the how common is testicular damage and infertility in adolescents, and which is more harmful, malignancy per se or chemotherapy? And how should we counsel the parents regarding the situation?
Correct. So that's easy. So anything which is active, anybody who is acting smart at the time of difficulty is going to be beaten up the maximum. So in adolescents and young adults, your testes, your ovaries are active and they are proliferating. Their activity wise, they are at their best. You are giving chemotherapy, which is a cell cycle inhibitor that is going to impact the testes and the ovaries both. It is primarily the treatment. Very rarely in ALL, it might goes to the testes and then it's a different ballgame. But in most of the cancer, it is the treatment which is giving the punishment to these organs rather than the cancer per se. But if it is a germ cell tumor, if it is a testicular tumor, if it's an ALL into the testis and also a different thing. But most of the time, it is the treatment which is giving them the problem.
Thank you.
Question... Dr. 1 minute,
Yeah.
Dr. Satya, can you remove the slide so that we can have we can look all the screen, full screen?
I did that.
Dr. Satyendra,
Okay,
can you stop sharing your screen? Yeah.
Yes, I did that. You might be seeing it. Okay. Yeah.
Yes. Right. So another question is by Dr. Anubha Nama, and she want to know that what is the survival as seen during leukemia treatment. I think very well already answered by the Dr. Kateva. If you want to add some.
No, just remember something. If you are into the ALL, into the pediatric, your chances of going to be cured forever with the first time treatment is around, I will say in India, 70%. Overall, in few centers, we are touching around 80%. But in adolescent, it goes down by 15%. In AML, we say your chance of cure just by chemotherapy is around 60%. So that means in AML or in ALL, whosoever are not cured, the disease is going to come back. So when the disease come back, we do a transplant, and again 50 to 60% are cured forever. And in pediatric oncology, we are there to talk about cure. We are not talking about 1 year survival, 5 year survival, 3 year survival. No, gentlemen, we are here to talk about cure, because our job as a pediatric oncologist is to give the most powerful Indians to the society. So it's all about cure. It's not about the survival of 1 or 2 years. So it's very, very good, and we should not be bothered about the outcomes. Even if they come back, we have modalities to deal with it, and we can give a lot of cure to them.
Thank you. There is one more question with Dr. A. Parmeshwaran. He wants to know about the management of oral cancer.
So oral cancer are very rare in pediatrics until it is rhabdomyosarcoma. It is more of a thing of the adult, where the alcoholism and the smoking becomes head and neck cancer become a big issue. But in ours, it is most of the time, you see some bony lesions into the LCH, you see some, lesions over here, the retrobulbar into the neuroblastoma, sometimes the rhabdomyosarcoma, retroorbital and all that. So oral is very, very rare in pediatric, but it is very, very rare. So there's no point in talking about those carcinomas. They are still there, some 2 to 3%. But if I happen to see a child with oral cancer, I definitely involve the medical oncologist with me, because those are the people who are treating it much more than us. It is not about, less than 18 years, it's going to be with me only. No. If somebody is better than you, definitely involve them. So oral cancer is primarily a problem of adults, not the pediatrics. Very rarely you see involvement of the oral cavity.
Thank you. The another one is asked by Dr. Kusum Vyas. She want to know about the midazolam and ketamine for sedation. We are using. What is your opinion regarding using midazolam or ketamine or both?
Correct. So we are using both, and first we give the maximum dose and everything has been prepared, and there is a protocol, and the pediatric intensivists come for that. So first we use midaj, and then we give ketamine, and with the ketamine we look for the horizontal nystagmus into the eye, which actually tells us the initiation of the the proper sedation into that patient. And the one thing I want to tell is, yes, it is possible to give midazolam and ketamine, but there are few situations where you need to be very careful, and either a LMA or a very smart pediatrician who can intubate that patient in the difficult time, particularly when we are dealing with SVC or the mediastinal syndrome. So superior mediastinum something and the superior vena cava syndrome, you need people who can do it very quickly for you, because sometimes they just go away with you. So it's a safe one. And at Gangaram we had even done the nitrous also. That was also possible. We had a nitrous cylinder over there. But midazolam ketamine very safe, very effective, and the childs are usual in the children most of the time are very happy. But be careful that one rare event when you need to have that pediatric intensivist with your side or LMA trained in LMA, and you just 2 minutes of ambu and everything going to be okay. But you need to be ready for that, and that's it. And actually, before that, we actually assess the air and everything. There is a set protocol with us. In the last 5 and 6 years, God forbid, I have not seen anything like that, but it can happen any day, and for that you need to be ready with the protocol.
Anybody from the audiences want to ask more questions?
Yes, one. Can I ask, sir, some psychological aspect? Because I was attached to, I am with the Adolescent Health Academy from last 1 year.
Yes.
So, what is the, how do you manage in adolescence the anxiety and depression part associated with malignancy?
So I don't deal with that. I have somebody who deals with pediatric anxiety and depression, and it is very, very common. Once you start looking into it, categorically into the pediatric malignancies. So it was difficult to start with because once you start sending them child, then they start realizing, but the outcome is so satisfying and pacifying that I don't pretend to be a child psychologist, and so I don't even write a M of medicine. I send them to that expert. They deal with it, and I see the difference is like day and night, beautiful. But once you start realizing it's like celiac disease, until unless we heard of it, it was not there. But once we thought, oh, it is there, it is everywhere. It's similar way. Adolescents are they're so prone for depression. They're so prone to, get locked in, introvert, and so they need a lot of help. They need a lot of help. I don't do that. My pediatric, the psychologist, they do it.
Okay.
Dr. Satyendra, a few words about palliative care.
Yeah, so palliative care, yeah, so that's a very, very important thing, and I forgot, I'm really sorry. So palliative care now is changing in 21st century, because it was palliative care just like, I should say 20 years ago, it was just like nothing can be done. So you take some cyclophosphamide and etoposide and maybe something else, weekly something, and more or less the patient is gonna die. But now the palliative care means pain-free cancer treatment, quality of life as far as you are prescribing it, and even now the combinations of palliative care are coming which are inducing CRs. And the name of that care now is metronomic chemotherapy. Lot of work has been done by Banavali sir from PMH onto that, and we were shocked to see first time when he showed us that those were the child where we thought nothing can be done, and we gave them the oral metronomic chemotherapy, and now they are into CR for the last 4 years, 5 years. You understand? We are giving the families 4 hafte, 5 hafte. Now they are into CR. CR means complete remission. So now the whole concept is changing. So let me introduce a new concept. So what we think as pediatric oncologists is that we are not treating the cancer the way we should be treating. Why? Because with chemotherapy, we are killing the cancer, but we are killing the anti-cancer system, which is the immune system also. The smarter way can be that we tell the immune system, okay boy, you just cannot shake hand with the cancer and you need to do the work you are meant for. But with chemotherapy, we are just blasting everything away. Now, with more and more targeted and molecular profiling, now we are understanding that, okay, giving a lot of chemotherapy is not a smart idea, but giving them the targeted, like CML, imatinib CML, you just give, no, CML, it was all like transplant and interferon or what all, busulfan or whatever chemotherapy was there, but now it is just imatinib, dasatinib, and you can't even tell. And the girls who are taking imatinib and dasatinib, they look much more smarter than a healthy girl over there because the skin and everything looks like shining. So the life is changing. And now with this concept of combining this targeted therapy with some background chemotherapy, which is very low dose, where that keeps on hurting the angiogenesis of that cancer, and the target therapy bringing it down, just the PD-L1, which was given the Nobel Prize just 2-3 years ago. Now the game is changing. Now the palliative therapy, in my understanding, I think in the next 10 years, it is going to be as major a subject as medical oncology in cancer care, and it is a serious contender of a good quality life. So palliative care 20 years ago was just like, doing the duties, but now it is pain-free, quality of life, and even CRs. And I'm sure slowly we will learn more and more how to induce these NK cells and T cells. And with this smaller number of chemotherapy, we will even cure the child. So it's a different concept, and onto which we can again do something, a small conversation onto that.
Thank you.
So palliative care is very important, and we are also having a huge burden of leukemic patients in our center with Kapil sir. I have seen approximately 585 registered patients we are dealing with, and more than 125 patients are registered in this year only, in year 2020-21. And psychological aspects, as asked by Dr. Surya Sethi, is very, very important. Not only the adolescent has to be taken care of, but also their parents also. If we treat if we counsel them very well, then the total outcome is dramatically improved. One more question asked by another Dr. S.P. He is thanking you for a very nice presentation and want to know when to suspect a malignancy in adolescents and young adults, any high risk category.
So there are no high risk category, and I'm really thankful to the pediatricians for doing the diagnosis workup. It is suddenly, if you do the diagnostic workup as a pediatrician, the family is so comfortable with you, right? Because you are a general pediatrician, and the moment you see something wrong and you say, okay, you go and meet the pediatric oncologist, where 10 childs are sitting with a cancer diagnosis, that family is dead, man. That is dead immediately. So whenever somebody calls me, I tell them what is to be done. Please do this also. Please do that also. Once you have the diagnosis, then that makes sense to come to a cancer center where cancer patients are there. As far as how do they present, and is there a high risk category? So let us be very sure the day we come to know why cancer happens, we will be able to answer these questions, because as of today, we know how to treat it, but even today we don't know what exactly happens so that a cancer comes up. We know there is some change into the cancer stem cell or something happens, and then it is not ready to die, and then we have the cancer. A lot of issues about apoptosis and all that. But anything beyond the normalcy which cannot be, so my professor Dr. P.C. Khatri always taught me 4 dialogues. And the one thing was the most common presentation of a common disease, the rare presentation of a common disease, the common presentation of a rare disease, and the rare presentation of a rare disease. And these 4 things, they start from pediatrics, and they are the thing to help you even in the pediatric oncology. Anything which your pediatrician inside you can't explain, that why would this happen? The one simple thing I want to take home message is, if you see a child with anemia that is normocytic normochromic, severe anemia, be very, very concerned about that patient. That is something sinister going on. Normocytic normochromic, severe normocytic normochromic anemia in a child, it's a bad idea to sit on to that patient. You need to dig deep to find out what is going on. So anything which is beyond normalcy, anything which is not explained by your pediatrician inside you, should, you keep on applying. There are no clear-cut things which blast is there in peripheral smear and lymph node here and there, and you all know that. There is no point in telling the pediatricians who are doing the practice for the last 40-50 years. I don't want to be that one. They know it more than me, right? But anything which you feel cannot be justified. EB virus is okay, that may be infectious mononucleosis, but infectious mononucleosis has got its way of doing things which you know more than me. But if you see a lot of lymph nodes, big lymph nodes, you start thinking about lymphomas. You see hepatosplenomegaly and periarticular pain, not into the joint pain, around the joint pain. You might be dealing with leukemia. You see, the child is the early morning vomitings and this bone pains. The bone pains, the growing bone pains are they are there. And let me tell you, we pediatricians should always remain innocent, and we should not start thinking like pediatric oncologists, because then we are going to make the life of all the families hell. Because the moment you utter the word oncology, it is very difficult for the family to, so that's perfectly fine. We can have one or two miss, it is okay. But if the 98% of the patients, they are going home happy, it's a job well done. But if you see something which is beyond us, some cytopenias which are not explainable, some lumps and bumps here and there are some big lymph nodes, the lump is there, the child is not walking appropriately, there is some mass over here. And these are the simpler things which doesn't have to be, I don't pretend to be, a genius who can just X-ray everything right now. I also work it out, and you will also work it out. So just deviation from the normalcy, and you will be good to diagnose.
One more thing to be added, or I want to know that sometimes parents come with their kid and they ask, सर अभी हमारी फैमिली में एक डेथ हुई है कैंसर से, एंड इसको देख के बताओ कि इसको कैंसर तो नहीं होने वाला है. So how to deal with these kind of the parents, and how to justify their query, and is there any biochemical markers or some test we can order preliminarily, or we should just...
So Pawanji, this question you had asked me 3.5 years ago, when I was very, very naive, innocent pediatric oncologist. The answer was very easy. Don't worry, kuch nahi hai, main bol raha hu, go home and all that. But if somebody asks me, I'll say there is 9.5 out of 10 child, it is going to be okay. But in the remaining half, if you are serious about it, we need to do few tests, and then only we can say it is there, it is not there. I have learned it very hard that never say never. It's in medical science, there is no guarantee of anything. So you take the risk of 0.5%, you go to the marriage, enjoy the life. 0.5% is very small, but I cannot say it is 100%. There is nothing wrong with it. And you still tell them 99.5% means everything is going to be okay. But this 0.5% you take it, and whenever you have time, you come back if you feel like. But 100% cannot be answered. This is something same that with the HbA2, in an anemic patient they say, and then they ask you, so there is no thalassemia intermedia. But that's the wrong answer, right? It can be, because if the total hemoglobin is less, that even HbA2 might be normal. But once you treat the child with the iron therapy, because there was a concurrent iron deficiency anemia, and the total hemoglobin increased from 9 to 12, and suddenly if you repeat the HbA2, you come to know, oh, now this is 3.5. So now suddenly the whole HPLC changed. So if somebody wants you to give a guarantee, the simpler thing is, okay, go ahead and do the genetic test. Even that is not 100%, this is 99.95%, because there can be a novel mutation in that. So now having faced all these medical issues, I answer it a bit differently. But most of the time it is going to be okay. But you never say, I guarantee nothing is going to be.
Dr. Siaram Didel from AIMS Jodhpur also wants to contribute some. Please unmute him. Karan, can you please unmute Dr. Siaram Didel?
So now
Good
he
evening,
should
sir.
be able to unmute and talk.
Yes, sir. Good evening, sir. So my two queries, sir. One query is many times we diagnose child with leukemia, definitive diagnosis, but parent still not want to take treatment. Okay. So how we can convince them for that treatment, sir? Another query during this COVID era, because if we treat the patient with intensive chemo, there is a risk of neutropenia, getting the infection and requiring the admission. And currently, nearly in the end, total 4 floor are blocked for COVID admission. And anyone can turn positive, or managing the leukemia patient with febrile neutropenia in COVID is very difficult. But there is another risk to break the chemo, risk of relapse. So if there is any mild chemotherapy, just like 6 MP as a maintaining target of neutrophil count, NC above 1500, we can maintain on them till this severe high risk burden of the COVID settle down.
So Siaramji, the second question is very easy and that can be answered that yes, they can be put on interim maintenance, and interim maintenance is easy. They can do the CBC into the nearby house. They can send you WhatsApp view. You can keep their the TLC between 2000, 1500 se 2500, those 2000 se 3000, whatever you have said, that is easy, and that's fine because if the child is the problem is if it is a very high risk and who needs a transplant. And it's a very high risk and you need to introduce the rescue chemotherapy. And you have to do it. And we are doing it in a very difficult, you need a lot of help from the hospital. But the first question is how to convince somebody to take the treatment is, I'm still learning the art that, 50 to 60% of my patients, they don't pay. I do crowdfunding for them. I have done crowdfunding of 20 lakh, 30 lakh, 40 lakh, 50 lakh, even 60 lakh. So I have done treatment of the juta gaanthne wala, golgappe wala and all that without taking a single rupee from them. So money is never the issue, but most of the parents think that ultimately it is going to be the issue. So one thing I can remove, but still there are a lot of patients where I fail to convince them. Like at JK Loan and Jodhpur, I don't have so many patients where I don't have time. I have time with them, and we spend a lot of time. But sometimes it is very difficult to convince them, and then I do not convince them after a limit, because with chemotherapy, if some severe neutropenia, severe sepsis, and they die, and then they say he is the how it goes. So I try to tell them with the fact, I try to tell them I'm there to help you even with money and everything. You don't have to bother about it. And now I have few kind donors to even help them with their stay also, right? But still there will be few patients, they will go away. So that if you happen to get that magical trick to make them take the treatment, please tell me. But most, they are difficult people. Sometimes they don't stay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Yes.
sir.
This is a very, very, very tricky and an artful thing to counsel the patients for the treatment, because boss has said that money is never a problem. We have the patients who need not to pay anything, even a single penny they need not to pay.
Still
Even
they don't take
sometimes
treatment.
still they don't want to take treatment. They think ultimately child has to die or something else. We do not know what are the reasons behind it, but still they don't want to take treatment. So it's really difficult to counsel them for such a longer duration. The duration is also very important. 2.5
So sometimes
years.
one parent told me that I am not taking treatment because with treatment this child is going to be there for 2-3 years. Ultimately तो मर ही जाएगा. But 2-3 साल में मेरे सारे रिश्तेदार को पता लग जाएगा कि मेरे बच्चे को कैंसर है और उसकी वजह से मेरे बाकी बच्चों की रिश्तेदारी नहीं होगी because इनके घर में कैंसर है. So that was one of the reasons social taboo, which I was surprised to understand that God. This is also the cause, right? But lot of things are there, and I try to convince them. Okay, there is a donor which can give you the house. Don't go 2-3 years over there, no? But they don't agree. Somehow they don't agree.
So now it's the conversation going too long, and I think we have already consumed more than 1.5 hour in this great conversations
Yes.
and a very nice talk with Dr. Kateva sir. Now I would like to invite Dr. Kapil Garg sir to say precisely about that talk and something he wants to add with his great experience. Sir.
He's present.
Kapil sir. Yes, he is present. Kapil sir, please unmute yourself.
Sir, you are not visible and also not audible.
ये डिसमिस क्या कर रहे हैं?
Karan, can you help Dr. Kapil Garg sir?
So on to a spiritual note, when you are not audible and when you are not visible, but you are there, then you are cosmos.
So in the meantime, I invite Dr. Pathan sir to say a few words.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Welcome, sir.
First of all, I am very sorry because of some technical problem. I could join late, but whatever I have heard, it's a very good discussion. And in future, when the situations will be normal, I would like to keep this CME actual in Jaipur.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. So,
Kapil sir, I think sir is not
Kapil
there.
Garg sir. So, can we take then concluding remarks from Dr. Jagdish Singh, sir?
No, call Dr. Kapil.
Okay.
Phone पे बात करो ना. Tell him to come.
Yeah.
Yes, there he is.
Yeah.
Sir is there.
Sir is there. Yes, sir.
Sir, unmute yourself.
Yes, volume
Sir,
is
you are
low,
not
so you need
audible.
to speak. So volume is low. So, yeah. Yes, it will be good now.
Sir, unmute yourself.
Sir, unmute, sir. Sir, you are mute. You have to unmute, sir. Not audible.
Karan can do that.
I think there is a problem.
मुन्ना एक बार नानी से बात करना प्लीज.
As the person you are trying to reach is on another call. Please stay online or call later.
सर फोन पे बोल सकते हैं सेठी बॉस को और आप स्पीकर पे ऑन करके.
हाँ, मैं वही कर रहा हूँ.
Stay online or call later. आपकी कॉल प्रतीक्षा.
हेलो।
हाँ सर, इसमें बोल दीजिए, मैंने स्पीकर मोड पे डाल दिया है ना, बोलिए सर।
Okay. So first, I would like to congratulate the speaker for a very lucid and informative talk. He has given an excellent talk. Yes, I must say, and he has raised many pertinent points that why prognosis is poor in adolescents. Firstly, because of their self-decision making and careless behavior. Secondly, the pediatrician with whom they are more comfortable might not be knowing the epidemiology of cancers in that particular age group, and so may miss the abnormal signs and symptoms. And thirdly, they are being treated by adult protocols. I completely agree with him, and this needs to be changed. And another very important point raised by him is that please don't treat any child before referring. ये हमें बहुत प्रॉब्लम आती है बिकॉज वी रिसीव सो मेनी पेशेंट्स जिसमें स्टेरॉइड स्टार्ट कर दिया होता है और स्टेरॉइड स्टार्ट करते ही सारी सब कुछ गड़बड़ हो जाता है. सो दिस इज वन वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट रेज्ड बाय हिम. दिस शुड बी रिमेंबर्ड एंड ट्रीटमेंट शुड नॉट बी स्टार्टेड बिफोर वैक्सीन. सो आई थिंक दैट वाज अ वेरी वंडरफुल टॉक. और मैं डॉक्टर जगदीश सिंह के लिए एक चीज और कहना चाहूंगा कि सर इज वेरी हम्बल और अपने सारे अचीवमेंट्स अपने चेलों को पकड़ा देते हैं.
मैं भी कहना चाहूंगा कि जगदीश सिंह सर और कपिल सर के अंडर में मैं धीरे धीरे पौधा से आई एम फीलिंग वेरी ब्लेस्ड के साथ काम किया, सबने ग्रो किया.
So, Pawan,
Yes, sir.
we can move away for vote of thanks or something.
Yeah.
Anything? Okay. So, can I call Dr. Rajkumar is there? Dr. Rajkumar, Dr. Ora? Yes, Rajkumar.
Boss, good evening.
Good evening, good evening.
So, first of all, this was very excellent talk. And as usual, we all know we had hematological stalwart with us, Jagdish Singh sir, Kapil Garg sir, and our forever dynamic Kateva boss. And we know their memes and all that in the WhatsApp group. We always remember that sir के जो audio videos आते हैं, and they are very excellent. And my colleague Pawan is a growing hematologist and he is doing very good. And today's talk highlighted very many aspects about the malignancies, adolescent problem in the hematological aspect. So I will again thank from Jaipur AHA and Jaipur IAP to Jagdish Singh sir, Kapil sir, and Ashok Gupta sir, and Kateva boss and Pawan for this excellent presentation and the moderating such good session in this COVID era. We all know this is after a long time we have done this online session, and hopefully we were expecting Sethi boss and me के COVID कम होगा तो हम physical चालू करेंगे, but सोचने से पहले ही सारा online दोबारा we have moved to that.
We already tried in Lalit.
And then we have to be postponed at last time. At last minute. So hopefully this all goes well, and again thankful from the Jaipur IP. Over to Sethi boss.
Thank you. Thanks to all. And I welcome my executive to please come and take an initiative to start at least once or in 15 days one webinar till COVID situation improves. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Dr. Surya,
Yes,
I
sir.
thought you were inviting us for something else.
Invited us for?
You were inviting us
Okay.
something else.
Yes, sir. Physically, in physical CME will do that.
नहीं, home delivery तो allowed है.
Okay, sir. Sir, definitely we'll do that. We'll do
I
that.
just want to mention one thing.
Yes, Kusum.
I just want to mention one thing. Actually, I personally contacted Dr. Swati Bhave, Dr. Sushma Desai, and Dr. Preeti Galagali. They are all names in adolescent pediatrics. So somehow they could not attend, but and Dr. Swati Bhave just now sent me a message that I convey my regards to the chairpersons Dr. Jagdish Singh sir, Dr. Kapil Garg sir, and Dr. Ashok Gupta sir, and best wishes for Dr. Satyendra.
Yes,
So
she also
this was
sent
the
this
message I
message to me. I also received same message.
Yeah. Okay. And Dr. Sushma Desai was very happy. She even posted this brochure and all in North AHA, North Zone AHA. But
Wow.
somehow, I think not many people joined. But ma'am is very happy that Jaipur AHA is organizing such sessions and people are coming forward.
सर जेके लोन में ट्रांसप्लांट चालू करते हैं.
नीड ऑफ द
जरूरत
आवर.
है सर. हाँ जरूरत है सर, करते हैं.
नहीं, वो तो ऑलरेडी एक्चुअली काफी सारे ट्रांसप्लांट्स हो रहे हैं वहाँ पे. काफी सारे ट्रांसप्लांटेशंस.
हाँ मैं बोन मेरो की बात कर रहा था सर.
अच्छा हाँ तो ये क्लियर करो ना. बहुत सारे ट्रांसप्लांट्स हो रहे हैं.
मैं वही उधर आप यही मानिएगा, आई एम अवेलेबल सर व्हेनेवर यू फील लाइक, बट होना चाहिए वहाँ सर, होना चाहिए वहाँ सर.
नहीं होना चाहिए ट्रांसप्लांटेशन.
होना चाहिए सर.
Dr. Pawan, Dr. Kapil Garg sir and Dr. Pawan will start, I think.
Yes, yes.
They will take the lead.
Definitely.
अपन कर सकते हैं सर, बहुत आसानी से कर सकते हैं, कोई चक्कर नहीं होगा, कोई टेंशन नहीं है, अपन कर सकते हैं.
So,
सर की आवाज नहीं आ रही है.
सर के चेहरे से मैं समझ रहा हूँ सर खुश है, राजी हैं.
So I think, Kusum, anything?
No.
Chalo.
I think that is enough, and Dr. Satyendra has given a very nice talk, and actually 2-3 queries I had, they are all this. I'm satisfied. My questions have been answered.
And this all credit goes, today's credit goes to Dr. Kusum.
Yes.
She is behind this all, doing this webinar, for today's webinar. So thank you, Kusum.
Thank you.
But I think Dr. Kusum looks very tense.
You gave me the opportunity,
बहुत
so
tense लग रही है.
do it.
हाँ sir. Sir, I think photo आ रही है sir उसकी.
Very tense.
नहीं sir, photo.
नहीं सर, मैं मोबाइल से ऑपरेट कर रही हूँ और बार-बार डिस्चार्ज हो रहा है. मैं बार-बार चार्ज करती हूँ और वो बार-बार. तो मैं ये ईयरफोन लगा नहीं पाती सर.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kusum ma'am, can we give the closing remarks?
Yes, Shruti, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just mute everyone. Sorry. Good evening, one and all in the audience. On behalf of Team AHA, Team IAP, and Plasmagen Biosciences, a very warm good evening. We thank all the esteemed doctors we heard today, Dr. Ashok Gupta, Dr. S.P. Sethi, Dr. Kusum Kala, Dr. Mohit Vora, Dr. A.A. Patan, and Dr. Rajkumar Goyal. And most importantly, we thank the speaker, Dr. Satyendra Kateva, for passionately delivering his talk. I cordially thank all the doctors across India who have attended the session to have spent your evening with us and joined in on this 90-minute session buzzing with almost collective 200 years and more of experience handling hematological malignancies and adolescents. For those who joined us late into the session or might have missed out on a few crucial minutes, please be assured we'll be sharing the link to the session at the earliest with all of you all via email. We will also be sharing a feedback form via email. Please feel free to share your feedback. In the meanwhile, we do have your contact details and we eagerly look forward to connecting with you soon with our future sessions. Thank you once again. Good night from all of us.
Thank you.